Live from NewsNation headquarters, this is NewsNation Prime.
We're tracking this breaking tonight. Israel delaying the release of 600 Palestinian prisoners, citing the poor conditions of hostages. The vans with those prisoners inside left the open gates of the prison, only to literally turn around and return inside. We're welcoming in our panel on this and more. Republican strategist Matt Klink and NewsNation political contributor Kurt Bardella. Gentlemen, welcome both. It's good to see you. And Matt, let's start with you on this. Given this breaking news, how tenuous is the ceasefire deal in this moment, and is phase two clearly in jeopardy?
Oh, phase two is by all means clearly in jeopardy. I think that that foolish and disgusting protest by the Hamas terrorists with the two young children that were killed, I think that just sent a message to the world that these are not even people for what they're doing. And I think that, Benjamin Netanyahu is going to crack down hard. And the thought of releasing 600 hardened criminal terrorists back into Hamas is just too much to stomach. So, yeah, phase two is certainly under a huge cloud right now.
Okay, Kurt, I do want to move to CPAC, of course, this week, where President Trump spoke earlier today. Matt, I understand that you were actually there on the ground. Kurt, we'll start with you. Your take on Trump's speech today.
He delivers for his audience. Trump is the ultimate showman, and he has a very good sense and pulse on who his audience is and what he's trying to convey. And this was almost like a victory lap of sorts. And remember, we're getting close to the what we would normally call the State of the Union address, his first joint session address to Congress coming up here in the next 2 weeks. And I think if people who are looking for cues of what we're going to hear from him, pay attention to his CPAC speech, because I think that's the warm-up act for that address.
Matt, any surprises there on the ground? What are you taking away from this week?
No, and in fact, I was there today because I wanted to hear the speech. Don't forget, Natasha, that the people who attend CPAC, this is the base of the base. These are the most ardent Trump supporters. They've always been with him, and they are never leaving him. And they were wrapped in attention on every word, and he literally had them eating out of the palm of his hand. No, nothing surprised me. He talked a lot about, the progress on immigration with border crossings down 95%. He talked about his cabinet. Interestingly, the loudest cheer for cabinet members were RFK Jr. and Kash Patel. So, but yeah, I think that Kurt hit it on the head, is that this probably a slightly toned down version of what he said at the State of the Union, because he knows he's appealing to a broader audience, but certainly leading us where he wants to go in those remarks.
And Matt, we'll stay with you. Trump's saying he's close to getting a deal done to stop the war in Ukraine. Do you think he's been alienating Zelensky all week long? Is he doing enough to bring Zelensky to the negotiating table?
Look, Zelensky's going to come to the negotiating table kicking or screaming regardless, in part because, as he pointed out today, we've sent $200 billion to the Ukrainians. We've given that money to them in the form of, they don't have to pay us back. Europe's money was given in the form of a loan. And I think Donald Trump has been very clear. He wants to be known as a man who will bring peace and stop the fighting. So, yeah, I think that Zelensky cannot come at his own peril. But I think that, guess what? Like the other world leaders, when Donald Trump asks them or pressures them to do something, he'll be there if he knows what's good for Ukraine.
Okay, Kurt, what is your take here? And, in addition to that, it's interesting to see reported progress towards a deal that would give the U.S. access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals to repay our support. What is your take on this?
I think you have to look at it through the lens of Donald Trump's life experience, which has really been first and foremost in business and in the art of negotiation. And so when you're wired that way, you don't get something for nothing. You've gotten $200 billion of American money that is in the form of a loan that will be forgived. But now here we are at the 11th hour. And if you're going to want to get something done to bring peace to the region, you're going to have to give something, and that's going to be the access to the minerals. I do think there's a lot of concern and consternation from other European allies who have, gotten used to the traditional positions of the United States, the chilling effect potentially long term on allowing a quote peace deal that includes, another nation taking and seizing land forcefully from another free country. That's not a precedent you necessarily want to stamp the U.S. approval on. That could have large unintended consequences in the big picture. So there are a lot of geopolitical long-term interests at stake here. But first and foremost, Trump sees this as a negotiation. And if you want the U.S. support in any way, you're not getting it for free anymore. I think that's the message he's sending loud and clear.
Loud and clear. Matt, let's go back to CPAC. You know, Trump praising the work being done by Elon Musk and Doge and cutting costs, firing, as he puts, the corrupt bureaucrats. We see this tweet from Musk today that all federal workers will be required to explain what they've been working on over the last week, to send these bullet points, CC their manager, and that a lack of response by end of day Monday will be taken as a resignation. Matt, is this the right thing? Your thoughts on this? And do you see a point where Musk and Trump will be satisfied with their cuts?
Again, Natasha, I really don't know, but this is the private sector does this all the time. And the fact that only 6% of federal workers were going into the office, some of them are alleged to have had second jobs while they were getting their government paychecks. So, I mean, look, the American voters wanted accountability from Donald Trump, particularly from the federal bureaucracy. The bureaucracy has run rampant. I mean, Donald Trump spent a good 3 or 4 minutes talking about some of the scams uncovered by Doge and Elon Musk. So this has broad public support, and I think that the more Trump is going to keep pressing on this because he knows he's on the right side.
Kurt, one more thing for you. As this was unfolding at the White House yesterday, I literally wanted to ask you about this. The president having this verbal exchange with Maine's Democratic Governor Janet Mills over federal efforts to ban transgender women from playing in women's sports. Let's take a listen.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't. And by the way, your population, even though it's somewhat liberal, although I did very well there, your population doesn't want men playing in women's sports. So you better comply, because otherwise you're not getting any federal funding. Every state, good, I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one.
So after this exchange, the Education Department says it will be looking into Maine's Education Department about trans athletes. Given Trump's reputation for holding grudges, does this put Maine and Governor Mills directly in Trump's crosshairs going forward, Kurt?
Well, I think you have to think about the broader political reality here. One of the swing votes that Donald Trump is going to need to get anything done, in theory, is Senator Susan Collins from the great state of Maine. Now, I used to work for the other senior senator from Maine, Olympia Snowe, back in the day, and I can tell you, Mainers, maniacs as we lovingly call them, do have a fierce independent streak. They like it when their leaders stand up to power, even if they might agree with Donald Trump on some of this. The idea that you're going to threaten Maine, that is going to create, I think, a galvanizing effect actually around the governor. And it's going to put a lot of pressure on Susan Collins to go, hey, are you going to let this happen? Because I can tell you, when I worked for Olympia, if President George W. Bush or President Barack Obama had threatened federal funding from the state of Maine like that, that would be a no-go. That would cost you a vote in every single vote until you walk that back. So I know he was talking to the governor of Maine, but do not forget, in the very tight margins that we have in the Congress and in the Senate, you cannot afford to lose too many Republican votes right now. Doing that could cost you Susan Collins' vote later on.
Kurt Bardella, Matt Klink.
It's a 90-10 issue. 90% support what the president's doing about stopping men.
I don't disagree with that on the issue. I don't disagree on the issue in public. I'm saying when you threaten federal funding for the state of Maine, it takes on a much broader, I think, element, and that's going to put Susan Collins in a tough spot.
We're out of time, but Matt Klink, Kurt Bardella, always lively, and appreciate you both. Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a good
Natasha.
one.